5 players of what if the injury didn't take away their best years of basketball from 1990 to now.
Well, I feel like if I go 5, I'm going to end up listing a lot of ones that maybe Kyle, you want to talk about. So I'll start off with a couple of, I don't want to say anonymous ones or people that you want to.
So this, when I said I was bringing up Stu, me and Stu were in the barbershop talking about Derrick Rose. And we were like, let's think of some other ones. So yeah.
I'll start off with Arvydas Sabonis. His
he's
injuries,
a big one.
Well, and people will be like, well, he played until he was 36 or whatever. He didn't come over to the NBA until he was like 31. A big part of that was because he had a lot of injuries while playing over there. And he didn't feel like he was physically able to compete.
Also, the USSR stuff was the much different climate than it is now.
Regardless, his injuries early in his career very much limited his mobility. He could have been an incredible player. I don't think a lot of times when you think of injuries early in your career, because he did play a long career, but it was hampered completely. A little more tragic. Drazen Petrovic, if you remember him, he was a certified bucket with the Nets way back when, ended up dying in a car crash. That's not really an injury, but that was a career cut short that was just devastating at the time. And then the third one I'll go with is Brandon Roy. And the degenerative
He was one I was going to bring up.
It was like he came out, he was incredible. And then 2 years later, he was done at like 26. That was real quick.
I mean, one of the ones I always go to is Greg Oden, right? And I know that the league, maybe not so much at that point, right? It was starting to move away from his type of player, but I will never forget watching that national championship game, Ohio State, Florida, where Florida is loaded. They're about to win back-to-back titles. They do win back-to-back titles. And they have 2 like legit NBA bigs in Joakim Noah and Al Horford, who go on to have great careers. And he just dogged them for 40 minutes. Like put up I think 25 and 10, which in college is like, you're putting in some damn work putting up those numbers.
Yeah.
And to watch that guy just go from that dude to just unable to be an NBA player was extremely sad. Now, I will say, I always try to take it out of everyone's like, well, it was still, you should have taken Kevin Durant and all that. And it's like, yeah, maybe Durant was an incredible player. It's just so sad.
You didn't
watching
see the injuries coming that bad. No.
It's so terrible watching that guy who's got all the talent, looks like the next generational big man, and just have it be taken away from him. And then he's been open about he went through a lot of trials and tribulations off the floor as his body failed him. And so just a very sad story for him. Another one to a lesser extent for me was T-Mac, where he had I believe he had microfracture surgery.
And did he play too long though?
Yes, I think the tail end of his career is less about, but his peak was unbelievable. And once he started to tail off physically, it wasn't quite as dramatic. The one that was real, the real childhood guy for me, and this was less, some of it injuries, some of it off-court stuff. Shawn Kemp was one of my favorite guys to watch when he was young and in Seattle and playing with Gary Payton. And then because of, alcohol abuse off the floor, frankly, his diet and his preparation, that got away from him and his body just started to fail him. He fell off a cliff so quickly. And I wish that we could have gotten full career of Shawn Kemp, because that guy was an absolute marvel to watch at his peak.
Yeah, so I have a few that definitely I want to add to it just before we get out of here. Since, again, me and Stu were talking about this, I was like, I got to ask the guys on the show because this is too good with Derrick Rose retiring and all that. So the very first one, speaking about Derrick Rose, and we were ranking him with the 5, and we said, all right, let's just put him at 5. Just to start it off, just put him at 5. Number 1 for me and for Stu was Penny Hardaway. I think it's top 2 for mostly everybody, but for us, and I've known him since we were 14, so we've been watching him since Memphis State, all that, so it was Penny.
Yeah.
Just the stuff that Penny did on the floor at Memphis State. He and Lorenzen Wright just wreaking havoc there for Memphis
and for
State.
Nick Nolte's team and Blue Chips, man.
No doubt, man. No doubt. So Penny was number 1. Grant Hill was number 2, as you guys have talked about. Then we went Brandon Roy number 3, because when you would hear Kobe talk about the toughest guys that he had to play against in that time where Kobe was Kobe, Brandon Roy was one of them. And Brandon Roy had two-way ability next to Tyrese Maxey. He could defend.
No, he would have been.
He could score. He can shoot. Yes. He was athletic. He'll dunk on you. And he was just phenomenal. He was no flaws in his game whatsoever. And even as good as he was at Washington, I didn't know he was going to be that damn good in the NBA.
And at crunch
so quickly.
time, he was nails. Absolute nails.
So if you could imagine him with Greg Oden and then Damian Lillard coming later, or even with LaMarcus Aldridge in the mix, Brandon Roy was it. The other ones that we threw out there were DeMarcus Cousins, just because when that injury happened with the Pelicans, when he tore his Achilles, that was it.
Oh, he went from a very productive, high-level player to just
that
cooked.
Was it. Yeah. I don't know where we put John Wall, because when that injury happened and his knees just kind of went, he was done. That speed was gone, and he was no longer.
I'll give you another one. Amari Stoudemire. That was a real dramatic drop off. Where I mean, even that first season in New York, he was like the MVP candidate level.
And he already looked like he was slowing down.
Yeah.
And then the microfracture stuff happened. Yeah. Larry Johnson with the back before he went to New York.
Grandmama, baby.
Larry Johnson with the back issue. That one was tough. And those were a few of them that we had came up with. Larry Johnson was the man. And we always talk about college basketball, and we talk about the UNLV teams.
Oh, man.
Man, if his back didn't give out on him the way that it did, who knows? Andrew Bynum was another one, Gene, that Stu had brought up that I totally forgot about.
Now, if you expand it past, I saw a few mentions of guys that, if you expand it past the 90s, right? Yeah,
right.
The one that always comes up is Len Bias, like that very tragic.
And we tried to keep that part out of it. It was more injury than it was. Yeah.
But if you go back even further, one of the biggest ones is Bill Walton, right? Like he was the pinnacle of basketball for a couple of years there. They win the title. They beat a team. The Sixers were heavily favored in that finals. They come out the next year. I think they opened the season like 40-10, and they are just rolling. Walton gets hurt and really ended up later in his career as a bench guy on the Celtics.
Talk about the
refinding
boy
himself
with the towel.
Yeah,
he was that guy,
being like the 6-man glue guy, all that. But in the interim period, it was just this kind of lost in the wilderness thing for a guy that not only at the NBA level, but is one of the best college players of all time as well. So to lose what could have been one of the great careers in basketball history and still have accomplished as much as he did is great, but it's the difference between being a what could have been and, maybe like an absolute inner circle.
Because a lot of these guys were still so good that they made the Hall of Fame. They still made it. Now, Penny won't make it because there just wasn't enough. Grant Hill will because of the college basketball stuff and what he did in
Team
the
USA
NBA
stuff too.
Yeah, of course. So he's going to be like Arthur Blank and put himself in the Hall of Fame. I don't know, whatever he's going to do. But so some of those guys still were good enough, though, to continue and become Hall of Famers, still have some all-star appearances and all. Another name that's mentioned that we always talk about, Andrew Toney with the feet and the issue 100%. There. One that he brought up when we were in the barbershop, Baron Davis. Baron Davis injury, man. The explosiveness.
I'll never forget that dunk in the playoffs. Oh, dude.
On Andre Karolinko.
Yes.
Just take the fine,
nasty.
Man. Just take the fine. Yeah, right.
I love Baron Davis is one of my favorite players as a kid. I just love that, athletic, and not big, right? But he could get up. He had the vertical athleticism and just punch one on people. I loved watching him. I'll never forget, by the way.
How many threes do you think he takes today? Because he was taking 7-8 per game
quite
back
a bit.
then.
Yeah, he's getting them up. Yeah. I'll never forget, there was a playoff game when he was on the Hornets. They're playing the Orlando Magic. I was watching it, and my friend's dad had a conversion van, and we were at some event. We were like, this is boring. I'm going to go watch playoff basketball. Baron Davis hit a buzzer beater that was out of his hands with a half a second left. So
this one.
Not close.
Right? Yeah.
And they waved it off. And I'm like, what are you looking at?
The video when
what
we
are you
Vegas.
doing?
You showed it to me in Vegas.
I was like, how the heck did you rule that? So that's burned into my brain. One more I want to throw out there from the pre-90s who he did fall off completely and is a giant what if. Ralph Sampson.
Yeah,
right? One of the all-time college players, comes into the league. He plays in the Twin Towers setup with Hakeem. Hits that crazy buzzer beater against the Lakers, peak Lakers, mid-'80s, to knock them out and set up. They played the Celtics in the finals. I think they lost in 5 games, 6 games, whatever it was. And they look like, oh, man, Houston is they're the next team, right? As the Lakers fall off, as the Celtics, are going to split up for various reasons. Houston is the next team. And then Ralph Sampson's body just gave out on him. He was like 7'4", right? And so he's a bit too tall for his own good. They also had other guys that dealt with drug problems and all kinds of other stuff, and that team went off the rails. So I was happy that Hakeem was still able to, at the end of the day, 10 years later or whatever, win those titles. But Ralph Sampson was a real, like, he could have been capital G great and never really had the chance.
Stu checked in on the chat. Look at that. He's listening. Yao Ming.
Can't and they're really big guys, man. Just no wonder Daryl had like Chuck Hayes and some of these other guys. Like, we can't take any more risks on the real big guys down
It's all good. It's not a lot of money.
Give me Montrezl Harrell, Chuck Hayes.
Yeah.
Nobody over 6'10".
Because of this, is there one player?
Also, I just want to point out, you've got two people that we talked about here with navicular bone injuries, and that was obviously a huge concern for Joel Embiid. He has done an exceptional job coming back from that one that has claimed a couple of careers.
Yeah. Keep knocking, man.
I'm making sure. If anything goes wrong, you can blame that guy.
Before we get to the roll call, I wanted to ask you guys this one off of this conversation because you went to, Len Bias and Drazen Petrovic and all that, but more just players who you thought were going to be that good, had the opportunity, and were just disappointing. Because when we talk about this, it wasn't an injury, and this is my guy. Every time the Sixers reacquired him.
Oh, I know exactly who you're talking about.
I just wanted him to
don't even have to
lose the weight.
DC.
Yes, man. Yes.
When he was talking about Petrovic, I was like, dude, that jersey version of Derek Coleman was
the royal blue
the 2010 All-Star.
Him and Kenny Anderson. I wanted Derek Coleman to just...
Well, the shame of it is, it seemed like towards the end of his career, he actually, it got through to him a little bit, and he started to give a little bit of his shit. But then he had a heart condition that really hurt him and made it tough for him to stay in shape. And it's like, it just felt like if you would have thought like that at 22 instead of at 29, 30,
I wanted Derek Coleman to just rip the league up because of how talented he was, man. I didn't care about the Nets. It was about Derek Coleman. I just wanted to see him just do his thing. And even when he was here in the Sixers uniform, the skill was still there. He was overweight and he didn't care. The realest of the real, because when he started, what was it? Was it the dress code even at that time? And he just said, hey, Larry Brown, he told the story. Blank check. Here you go. Beginning of the season. I'm not doing that. I mean, it wasn't like, take this. Here you go. Because I'm going to get fined. I'm not doing that. So was there one for you? Because Derek Coleman was mine, man. By the way.
DC was honestly the first one that came up.
All right, so that's fair. We're on the
Larry
same page.
Hughes, though, too. I really wanted Larry Hughes to work out. I don't know if I ever believed in Larry Hughes.
It wasn't a Sixers thing. It was just a talent thing.
Yeah, well, in part that I thought it would have been a really fun running mate next to AI. Yeah. I really wanted him to work out.
Yeah, that was
I think there were various reasons for this. Steve Francis is a big one for me. He came into the league like a house on fire.
That's a great one.
He's in that Baron Davis mold, right? Where he's not the biggest dude, but he had some explosive athleticism and is just punching. I was about to say a word I shouldn't say on here. Punching dunks on people in the NBA. And rookie of the year, he makes 3 straight all-star teams. And everything seems to be lining up for him. But he was pretty volatile. Yeah. And didn't seem like he ever turned the corner as like he shot well earlier in his career, but was never the 3-point shooter I think he needed to be to go from like where he was at to high level guy, and ended up flaming out pretty quickly. I think he only played about 8 years in the league, 9 years in the league. At the end, he got hurt, and that was kind of the end.
And that Orlando trade really broke him.
Yes.
That trade to Orlando really got to him.
Yeah, so he's a guy that I always think of like, it might not be wasted, right? He still made 3 All-Star teams.
Yeah, but he would have been a Hall of Famer if that trajectory, you're probably Team USA, Hall of more All-Stars, resume built Hall of Fame conversation that we talking about.
And look, I know he had a really rough childhood. I think that's probably part of it. I think there's stories out there about him just being, he's in like a defensive mode all the time, right? Instead of accepting coaching and being embraced by people. I think when he was pushed by coaches and people around him, it seems like he reacted negatively. And some of that I don't blame him for. But it's a shame because loved watching him. Really exciting player and just never really got there.
Good one here from Malcolm Carrington. Does Blake Griffin count?
Oh, I think he falls more in the health one.
Yeah, the health
for sure.
category.
All
Yeah.
the
He does.
The
In terms of
repeated injuries.
expectations, I think he mostly met them early in his career.
Yep.
He was what, the 2 pick?
Was
he
number
one? He was one?
He was number 1. Yep, he was number 1 overall. Final one, a super chat here from Devon, a.k.a. Schoolboy Beat, says, what would Keith Van Horn look like in today's NBA? He's certainly shooting threes.
Tall, soft
Wait,
shooter.
by the way, we just skipped over Ben Simmons. Isn't
Yeah,
he
no,
one
I
of
talked about him enough in my
Isn't
career.
he one of the great examples of like you just waste you're the next
Yeah.
hybrid Magic LeBron or whatever people are saying, and then now
Even Gene says Markelle Fultz because of we don't know because we never even got to see the best of him.
But in the
Ben
wasted
Simmons?
talent category, I would put Ben in there for sure.
We all silly like the mayor.